Story number 1. Whispers of Skinwalker Ranch, Utah. Present day. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that eerie summer at Skinwalker Ranch etched into my mind like the persistent whispers that seemed to follow us through those haunted grounds. My name is Alex Turner, and what transpired during our expedition has forever blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. It was late June when my friends and I decided to investigate the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in western Utah. Known for its unexplained phenomena, UFO sightings, shape-shifting creatures, and temporal distortions, the ranch had become a magnet for thrill-seekers and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Armed with cameras, recording equipment, and a healthy dose of skepticism, we set out to uncover the truth behind the legends. The journey to the ranch was long and arduous, the desert landscape stretching endlessly under the scorching sun. As we approached the property, the air grew unnaturally still, the usual sounds of wildlife muted as if the land itself was holding its breath. The ranch stood before us, a sprawling compound surrounded by high fences topped with barbed wire. The main house a relic of a bygone era, its windows dark and foreboding. Our host, Dr. Emily Hart, a renowned parapsychologist, welcomed us with a mix of excitement and apprehension. We're here to document and understand the phenomena that have plagued this land for decades, she explained, her eyes gleaming with determination. But remember, Skinwalker Ranch is unlike anything you've ever encountered. The first few days were uneventful, filled with routine observations and data collection. We set up our equipment in various locations around the property, from the dense woods to the desolate plains. Nights were spent huddled around campfires, sharing stories and theories about the ranch's dark history. It wasn't until the fifth night that things began to change. Around midnight, as the temperature plummeted and the moon cast long shadows across the landscape, we heard it, a low, guttural growl emanating from the depths of the forest. We froze, our hearts pounding in unison. As the sound grew louder, more menacing, Dr. Hart grabbed her flashlight, leading the way towards the source of the noise. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew thick with tension. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes that mirrored the fears festering within us. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a humanoid shape with elongated limbs and eyes that gleamed with an unnatural intensity. It was the Skinwalker, a creature of local legend, said to possess the ability to shapeshift into any animal it desired. "Stay back," Dr. Hart whispered, her voice trembling, but the Skinwalker advanced, its movements eerily fluid, almost human-like despite its monstrous form. We backed away slowly, the creature's presence overwhelming our senses, filling us with an indescribable dread. Just as panic began to set in, the Skinwalker stopped, tilting its head as if studying us. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished into thin air, leaving us standing in the oppressive silence of the night. We exchanged bewildered glances, the gravity of what we had witnessed sinking in. The following day, our experiences took a more disturbing turn. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Recordings captured inexplicable noises, and strange symbols appeared etched into our notebooks overnight. Sleep became elusive as nightmares plagued us, vivid and terrifying visions of the Skinwalker stalking us through the darkness. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, we decided to spend an entire night inside the main house. Armed with our recording devices and a sense of grim determination, we settled into the dilapidated living room, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with an oppressive energy, the boundaries between our world and the supernatural realm blurring. At the stroke of 12, the temperature dropped precipitously, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The room seemed to warp around us, the walls pulsating with an unseen force. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. A cacophony of whispers filled the room, voices overlapping in a dissonant symphony of anguish and desperation. "Leave, now!" The whispers echoed, sending shivers down my spine. We fumbled for our flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness only to reveal the same skinwalker we had encountered earlier, its eyes burning with malevolent intent. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice barely audible over the cacophony. The skinwalker tilted its head, the room around us shifting as if caught in a whirlwind of time and space. "You do not belong here," it hissed, its voice a haunting blend of human and animalistic tones. "Leave before it's too late." Before we could react, the room erupted in chaos. Objects flew across the room, the walls closing in as the whispers intensified, becoming a maddening roar. We tried to flee, but the exit seemed to vanish, replaced by an endless maze of corridors and rooms that defied logic and reason. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped in a nightmarish labyrinth, the skinwalker relentlessly pursuing us through the shifting dimensions of the ranch. Hours, or was it days, passed in a blur of fear and confusion. Our equipment captured fleeting glimpses of the skinwalker, its form constantly changing, morphing into different shapes and sizes, each more terrifying than the last. Time lost all meaning as we navigated the ever-changing landscape, our sanity fraying under the relentless pressure. Just as hope began to fade, a sudden burst of light enveloped us, the oppressive darkness lifting as the morning sun broke through the night. We found ourselves back in the main house, the skinwalker nowhere to be seen. Exhausted and battered, we stumbled out into the daylight, the horrors of the night still fresh in our minds. As we left Skinwalker Ranch behind, the memories of that night haunted us, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The ranch stood silent, its secrets still tightly guarded by the dark forces that lurked within. We never spoke of what truly transpired, the fear of attracting the Skinwalker's wrath keeping us silent. Years have passed since that fateful summer, but the legacy of Skinwalker Ranch remains, a place where the boundaries of reality are blurred, and the supernatural reigns supreme. Locals continue to speak of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, the legend of the Skinwalker growing with each passing year. Those who dare to venture too close speak of an overwhelming sense of dread and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. I often find myself staring at the horizon, the memory of those haunted nights a constant presence in my thoughts. The whispers of Skinwalker Ranch echo in my mind, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved, their darkness hidden away in the shadows of the unknown. And so, I warn others, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and understand that some places are cursed by forces beyond our comprehension. For in the heart of Utah, amidst the silent forests and endless skies, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, leaving behind only whispers and shadows in its wake. Story number 2. Whispers of Leatherface, Texas. 1970s. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that harrowing summer in rural Texas lingering in my mind like the persistent echoes of screams that once shattered the stillness. My name is Jake Thompson, and the events that unfolded during our ill-fated trip have left an indelible scar on my soul, a constant reminder of the thin line between safety and sheer terror. It was the summer of 1973 when my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip deep into the heart of Texas. We were a tight-knit group of college students, eager to escape the confines of campus life and immerse ourselves in the untouched wilderness. The stories of haunted forests and eerie legends only added to the thrill of our adventure. Little did we know, the legends were far more real and terrifying than we could have ever imagined. Our destination was an isolated area near the old Sawyer farm, a place shrouded in local folklore. The farm had long been abandoned, whispered to be the hunting grounds of a deranged family led by a man known only as Leatherface. According to the tales, Leatherface and his kin were infamous for their gruesome acts, hiding in the shadows of the dense woods, perpetually evading capture. Most dismissed these stories as mere superstition, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a shiver of unease whenever the topic arose. We arrived at the edge of the forest just as the sun began to set. The sky painted in hues of orange and pink that seemed almost too beautiful for the ominous woods ahead. Our campsite was nestled beside a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to guard the secrets of the land. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures began to fill the air. Around the campfire, we shared stories and laughter, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on our faces. It wasn't until midnight when the atmosphere shifted. An unsettling silence enveloped us, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. That's when we heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the depths of the forest. Probably just a branch hitting the tent. Mark, our skeptic, suggested, trying to brush off the unease that had settled over us. But Jess, always the intuitive one, frowned. It doesn't sound like a branch. It's too deliberate. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to investigate. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, we ventured into the darkness, the beams of our lights cutting through the thick foliage. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, leading us deeper into the woods. My heart pounded in my chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. As we pushed through a dense thicket, the clearing opened up to reveal an old, dilapidated shed. The tapping was now unmistakable, a steady, methodical knocking against the wooden door. We exchanged nervous glances before approaching cautiously. Should we knock back? Tom, the group's historian, asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could respond, the door swung open with a creak, revealing a figure clad in tattered clothing. His face was obscured by a grotesque mask made of what appeared to be human skin, his eyes empty voids that seemed to stare right through us. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, taking a step back. The figure remained silent, his presence exuding a chilling sense of menace. Suddenly, he lunged at us with surprising speed, the weight of his chainsaw swinging from his arm a horrifying sight. We scattered in panic, running back towards the safety of our campsite, the sound of his engine reverberating through the trees like a death knell. Breathless and terrified, we huddled together by the fire, our minds racing to comprehend the nightmare that had just unfolded. The tales of Leatherface were not just stories, they were warnings we had foolishly ignored. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and adrenaline. We heard footsteps circling our campsite, the low growls and mechanical whirs of the chainsaw punctuating the silence. Each shadow seemed to hide the grotesque figure of Leatherface, his presence a constant threat that kept us on edge. As dawn broke, the storm of terror began to subside, but the damage was done. We knew we couldn't stay any longer, our spirits broken and our trust shattered. Packing up in silence, we made our way out of the forest, the haunting memories of that night etched into our minds forever. In the days that followed, we reported the incident to the authorities, but the Sawyer farm remained a place of mystery. No concrete evidence was ever found, and Leatherface was never captured. The legends only grew, fueled by our terrifying encounter and the whispers of those who believed in the dark tales of the woods. Years have passed since that dreadful summer, but the scars remain. I often find myself lying awake at night, the memory of those black eyes and the sound of the chainsaw echoing in my mind. The legend of Leatherface is a stark reminder that some horrors are all too real, lurking in the shadows of the world we think we know. The stories continue to circulate, each retelling adding layers to the myth. Locals speak of strange noises and ghostly apparitions near the old Sawyer farm, reinforcing the legend of the deranged family that never truly left. Those who venture too close speak of an overwhelming sense of dread and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. I became a writer, channeling my experiences into stories that blend reality with the supernatural. My tales are a tribute to those lost moments of terror, a way to process the fear and the unanswered questions that still haunt me. But no amount of writing can fully erase the memories of that night, the night we faced the true face of horror and lived to tell the tale. And so, I warn others, heed the legends. respect the unknown, and understand that some stories are born from truths too dark to comprehend. For in the heart of Texas, amidst the silent forests and endless night, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, leaving behind only whispers and shadows in its wake. Story number 3. The Black-Eyed Children of West Texas. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that chilling encounter in the remote stretches of West Texas etched into my mind like the relentless heat waves that sweep across the desert. My name is Ethan Carter, and the events that unfolded one fateful summer evening have left an indelible mark on my soul. A constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was late August, a time when the Texas sun blazed with unforgiving intensity, turning the landscape into a vast, shimmering mirage. My friends and I had decided to take a weekend trip to a secluded farmhouse deep in the heart of the countryside. We were seasoned campers and thrill seekers, always yearning for new adventures away from the chaos of city life. The allure of exploring the untouched wilderness and the promise of a peaceful getaway were too tempting to resist. We arrived at the farmhouse just as the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the barren fields. The house stood alone, a relic of a bygone era, surrounded by towering mesquite trees that seemed to guard its secrets. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and the distant hum of cicadas, creating an atmosphere both serene and unsettling. That night, as we gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, the conversation inevitably turned to local legends. One story, in particular, piqued our interest: the legend of the Black-Eyed Children. According to the tales, these children were mysterious apparitions with pitch-black eyes and pale skin, who appeared at night knocking on doors and requesting entry. Those who encountered them spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread and an inexplicable fear that something was terribly wrong. We laughed off the stories, dismissing them as mere folklore spun by overly imaginative locals. Little did we know, the night was about to prove otherwise. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply, a rare occurrence in the Texan summer. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the mesquite trees and sending a chill through the air. We decided to retire for the night, retreating to our tents under a blanket of stars. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and groaning windows, seemed almost alive, whispering secrets we couldn't quite hear. Around 2 in the morning, I was jolted awake by a persistent knocking sound. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks on my ears, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too insistent. I lay there, heart pounding, listening intently as the knocking continued, growing louder and more urgent. "Guys, wake up," I whispered, nudging my friends awake. One by one, groggy and confused, we gathered around the fire, our senses on high alert. "What is it?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. "It's knocking. Someone's knocking on the door," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We glanced at each other, uncertainty and fear etched on our faces. The farmhouse door stood tall and imposing against the night, its wooden frame creaking with every gust of wind. The knocking persisted, echoing through the silent night, a haunting rhythm that sent shivers down our spines. "Maybe it's just an animal or a fellow camper," Sarah suggested, trying to rationalize the sound. But her words did little to quell the growing unease that settled over us. Mark, ever the brave one, decided to investigate. "I'll go check it out," he said, grabbing a flashlight and heading towards the door. The rest of us watched in tense silence as he approached, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. As Mark reached the door, the knocking intensified, more frantic and desperate. He hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door, revealing a pitch-black figure standing just outside. The figure was a child, no more than 8 years old, with an unsettling presence that defied explanation. "Can we come in?" the child asked, its voice soft yet filled with an eerie determination. "Please, we need help." Mark froze, his hand gripping the flashlight tightly. The child's eyes were completely black, devoid of any whites, staring straight into his soul with an intensity that left him paralyzed with fear. Behind the child stood two more figures, identical in appearance, children with black eyes and pale skin, their presence both haunting and otherworldly. I can't let you in," Mark stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his terror. "You need to leave," the children persisted, their knocking turning into a desperate plea. "Please, we have nowhere to go. We're lost." Mark took a hesitant step back, his instincts screaming at him to shut the door. "I said no. Go away." But the children didn't relent. Instead, they began to circle the house, their movements synchronized and unnaturally smooth. The air around us grew thick with an oppressive energy, the temperature dropping even further as the storm outside raged on. Suddenly, the lights in the farmhouse flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The only illumination came from the children's eyes, black voids that seemed to absorb all light and hope. We huddled together, paralyzed by fear as the children continued their relentless pursuit. "Please, let us in," the first child repeated, its voice now a chorus of sorrow and desperation. "We can't survive out here alone." A sense of impending doom washed over us as we realized these weren't mere apparitions. They were something far more sinister, entities that thrived on our fear and desperation. The farmhouse walls seemed to close in, the whispers of the wind turning into haunting cries that echoed through the night. In a moment of sheer panic, we grabbed whatever we could and fled into the storm, running through the darkened fields as the children's laughter echoed in our ears. The snowstorm had intensified, the blinding white flakes obscuring our vision and disorienting our every step. We stumbled and fell, the cold seeping into our bones as we struggled to escape the nightmare that had become our reality. We didn't stop running until we reached the edge of the forest, the farmhouse now a distant, fading memory swallowed by the relentless storm. Exhausted and shivering, we huddled together, the terror of the night leaving us shaken to our core. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. We reached out to locals, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The legend of the black-eyed children was dismissed as mere superstition, a tale spun by fearful minds. But we knew the truth: we had encountered something beyond our understanding, a malevolent force that had haunted us in our darkest hour. The farmhouse was eventually abandoned, left to decay under the harsh Texas sun and relentless storms. To this day, locals speak of strange noises and shadowy figures near the old property, reinforcing the legend of the black-eyed children. Those who dare to venture too close speak of an overwhelming sense of dread and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. I often find myself lying awake at night, the memory of those black eyes staring into my soul a constant reminder of the night fear became tangible. The legend of the black-eyed children serves as a haunting reminder that some mysteries are best left unexplored, and that the darkness we fear might be closer than we think. Years have passed since that terrifying encounter, but the legacy of that night remains vivid in my mind. The black-eyed children of West Texas have become a part of my personal folklore, a story I share with caution and a hint of fear. I warn others to heed the legends, respect the unknown, and understand that some shadows hide horrors beyond imagination. For in the heart of Texas, amidst the silent forests and endless snow, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, leaving behind only whispers and shadows in its wake. Story number 4. The Shadow of Goatman, a Maryland Nightmare. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that eerie encounter in the heart of Maryland's dense forests forever etched into my mind like the twisted branches that reach out from the shadows. My name is Daniel Harris, and the legend of the Goatman isn't just a story to me. It's a haunting reality that I live with every sleepless night. It was late October, the air crisp with the promise of winter, when my friends and I decided to embark on a weekend getaway to the rural outskirts of Frederick County. We were seasoned hikers and thrill seekers, always on the lookout for new adventures and stories to share. The allure of exploring the untouched trails of Maryland's backcountry was too tempting to resist, especially with the local lore surrounding the infamous Goatman. The legend spoke of a creature, half man, half goat, roaming the forests and abandoned bridges of the area. Supposedly, it was the result of a failed scientific experiment or perhaps a cursed being. Its origins shrouded in mystery. Locals whispered tales of disappearances and strange noises echoing through the night, attributing them to the Goatman's sinister presence. Most dismissed it as mere folklore, but a part of me couldn't help but feel a shiver of unease whenever the topic arose. Our plan was simple: spend 2 nights camping near the old Sawmill Bridge, one of the Goatman's reputed haunts. We arrived just as the sun began to set, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the dense woodland. The camp was nestled beside a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to guard the secrets of the forest. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, the flames dancing and casting flickering light on our eager faces. Stories flowed freely, each one more chilling than the last. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the crackling of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. It wasn't until the conversation turned to the Goatman that the atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension settling over us. "Seriously, have you guys heard the latest sightings?" Mark, our resident skeptic, asked, taking a long sip of his beer. "People say they've seen him around the bridge at midnight, stalking the roads." Jess, always the brave one, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Do you think there's any truth to it? I mean, with all the unexplained disappearances, maybe there's something out there." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've heard the stories. Some say he's searching for something, or someone. Others believe he's just a malevolent spirit, haunting the living." As the night deepened, the woods around us grew eerily silent, the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures muted by the thick blanket of darkness. We decided to take turns keeping watch, ensuring our safety in the stillness. It was during my shift that I first felt it. A presence. A cold whisper that seemed to brush against my skin like icy fingers. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce through the darkness. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of trees and shadows dancing in the moonlight, shaking off the unease. I settled back into my sleeping bag, the fire's warmth a small comfort against the chill in the air. Minutes turned into hours, and just as I began to drift into a restless sleep, a distant, guttural scream pierced the silence. My heart raced as I sat up, grabbing my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the swaying branches and the thick snow that muffled any sound. I called out to my friends, but there was no response, only the lingering echo of the scream. Determined to investigate, I rose and began to trek towards the source of the noise, my footsteps crunching softly on the snow-covered ground. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to watch my every move. As I approached the old Sawmill Bridge, the sight before me sent a chill down my spine. The bridge stood ominously against the night sky, its once sturdy beams now weathered and worn by time and neglect. The moonlight cast long, haunting shadows across the structure, making it appear almost otherworldly. As I stood there, my flashlight flickered, casting intermittent light that revealed nothing but the empty expanse beneath the bridge. Suddenly, a rustling noise emanated from the underbrush, and I swung my flashlight towards the sound, my breath visible in the frigid air. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was the Goatman. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and its hooves left deep impressions in the snow as it advanced slowly towards me. Frozen with fear, I watched as the creature came closer, its form a grotesque blend of man and goat. The twisted horns, the muscular build, the eerie silence that surrounded it, all elements of the legend made terrifyingly real. I tried to speak, to call out to it, but no sound came from my throat. My body was paralyzed, caught between the instinct to run and the horror of what stood before me. The goat man stopped just a few feet away, its eyes never leaving mine. I could feel its malevolent presence, a dark energy that seemed to drain the warmth from the air around me. In that moment, I understood why the stories were told, why people avoided the bridge after dark. The goat man wasn't just a creature of myth. It was a living embodiment of fear and despair, summoning every ounce of courage. I forced myself to take a step back, then another, slowly retreating from the bridge. But the goat man mirrored my movements, maintaining the same distance, his presence unyielding. Panic surged through me as I realized there was no escape, no way to outrun the nightmare that had become my reality. Desperate, I turned to run, sprinting back towards the campsite, my legs moving on autopilot. The forest blurred around me, the trees whipping past in a frenzied dance as I raced against the unseen force that pursued me. My friends were nowhere to be seen, their whereabouts unknown in the chaos of the night. Just as I felt the goat man closing in, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and I tripped over a fallen branch, tumbling to the ground in a heap. Dazed and terrified, I scrambled to my feet, the sounds of the storm surrounding me once more. But when I looked up, the goat man had vanished, leaving only the howling wind and the relentless snowfall in its wake. Breathing heavily, I made my way back to the campsite, the fear still gripping me tightly. To my relief, I found my friends huddled together, their faces pale and eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" Jess asked, her voice shaking. "Where was everyone?" I struggled to find the words, the night's horrors weighing heavily on my mind. "I saw him, the goat man. He was real. He was chasing me." Silence fell over the group as we processed the gravity of the situation. We knew we had to leave immediately, to escape the nightmare that had ensnared us in its icy grip. Packing up our gear in a frantic hurry, we made our way back to civilization, the legend of the goat man now a terrifying reality that we carried with us. Days turned into weeks, and the story of our encounter spread through the town like wildfire. Skeptics dismissed it as a collective hallucination brought on by fear and isolation. But those of us who experienced it knew the truth. The goat man wasn't just a figment of imagination. It was a predator lurking in the shadows, preying on those who dared to venture too deep into the darkness. I returned to my life, but the memory of that night never left me. Every time I pass by the old sawmill bridge, my heart races, and a shiver runs down my spine. The whispers of the past echo in my mind, a constant reminder of the thin line between myth and reality. The goat man remains a haunting presence in Maryland's folklore, a symbol of the unknown dangers that lie hidden in the most unexpected places. Years have passed since that terrifying encounter, but the legacy of the goat man lives on, a chilling tale that serves as a warning to those who seek adventure in the depths of the wilderness. The forests of Maryland hold many secrets, but some are better left undisturbed, their darkness guarding the mysteries that humans are not meant to uncover. And so, I warn others, heed the legends, respect the boundaries of the unknown, and understand that some fears are born from truths too terrifying to confront. For in the heart of Maryland's forests, amidst the silent trees and endless snow, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, leaving behind only whispers and shadows in its wake. Story number 5. Whispers in the Shadows. The Villisca Axe Murders, Villisca, Iowa, 1912. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that chilling summer evening in Villisca forever etched into my mind like the jagged lines of the axe that shattered our lives. My name is Jonathan Reed, and the horrors that unfolded in that small Iowa town have left an indelible mark on my soul. A constant reminder of the thin veil between peace and pure, unadulterated terror. It was the summer of 1912, a time when the heat hung heavy in the air, making the nights feel even more oppressive. I was a young journalist, eager to make my mark by uncovering stories that others overlooked. When I heard about the Villisca Axe murders, I knew I had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a story that demanded to be told, not just for its sensational nature but for the mystery that enveloped it. Villisca was a quiet town, nestled along the banks of the Iowa River, its streets lined with charming Victorian houses and friendly neighbors. The murders had taken place in a large, two-story home owned by the Sauter family, a prosperous family of 6 children and 2 guests. The brutality of the crime was unimaginable. The family and their guests were found bludgeoned to death with an axe, their bodies arranged in macabre poses that suggested the killer wanted to send a message. Though the motive remained elusive, determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I arrived in Villisca one sweltering afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the town. The house stood ominously at the end of a tree-lined street, its windows dark and lifeless, the once vibrant paint now faded and peeling. Locals eyed me warily as I approached, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and sorrow. I met with Sheriff William Johnson, a man whose stern demeanor masked the deep-seated trauma the town had endured. "Mr. Reed," he greeted me, his voice gravelly from years of dealing with unspeakable crimes. "I appreciate your interest, but some things are better left buried." I nodded respectfully, sensing the weight of his words. "I understand, Sheriff, but stories like these need to be told. People deserve to know the truth." He sighed, his shoulders sagging with the burden of responsibility. "We've searched every inch of that house, but there's nothing left to find. No fingerprints, no witnesses, nothing that points to the killer. It's like he vanished into thin air." Undeterred, I spent the next few days immersing myself in the town's history, speaking with the Sauter family members who had survived the fire that followed the murders, and poring over old newspaper clippings. The Sauters had fled their home amidst the chaos of the storm, but 5 of their children and the 2 guests were never found. The fire had consumed the house, leaving behind only ashes and charred remnants. But the bodies of the victims were never recovered, fueling rumors of supernatural involvement. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the town, I decided to visit the ruins of the Sauter house. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of burning wood still lingered in my nostrils. I approached the remains cautiously, the ground littered with debris and the skeleton of what once was a beautiful home. As I explored the charred remains, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. I set up my recorder, hoping to capture any unusual sounds that might explain the town's persistent belief in the house's haunting. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the ruins, sending shivers down my spine. The recorder began to pick up faint whispers, indistinct but undeniably present. I strained to listen, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. "Help us," they seemed to say. "Find us." My heart raced as I followed the source of the sound, my footsteps crunching on the broken glass and debris. The whispers led me to what remained of the living room, the charred fireplace a stark reminder of the night's horrors. As I stood there, the temperature seemed to drop dramatically, my breath visible in the frigid air despite the summer heat. Out of the shadows, ghostly apparitions began to materialize, transparent figures of the Sauter children and their guests, their faces etched with pain and fear. My blood ran cold as one of the children stepped forward, her eyes hollow and pleading. "Why can't you see us?" she whispered, her voice echoing through the empty room. I reached out, desperate to offer some semblance of comfort. "I'm here to help you," I assured her, though my voice trembled with fear. "I want to understand what happened." Another figure emerged, this one clutching an axe, his presence menacing yet sorrowful. "We were taken," it said, the words dripping with anguish, "by a darkness that cannot be seen, only felt." As the apparition spoke, the room seemed to twist and warp, the lines between reality and the supernatural blurring before my eyes. The whispers grew into cries, the spirits reliving their final moments in a loop of torment and despair. I realized that the murders were not just a crime of passion or malice but something far more sinister, a malevolent force that had claimed their lives and trapped their souls within the ruins of their home. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved deeper into the history of Villisca, uncovering tales of ancient rituals and dark magic that had been practiced in the region long before the murders. Legends spoke of a curse placed upon the land, a vengeful spirit seeking retribution for wrongs committed generations ago. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that the Villisca axe murders were the result of this dark legacy, a convergence of human cruelty and supernatural wrath. One night, as I sat in my motel room, poring over old diaries and records, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see the ghostly figure of Sheriff Johnson, his expression somber. "You shouldn't be here," he warned, his voice echoing like a distant storm. "Some secrets are meant to stay hidden." I stood my ground, my determination unwavering. "I need to know the truth, for the sake of those lost souls." He sighed, his ethereal form wavering. "If you pursue this path, be prepared to face the darkness that lies within. The spirits of Villisca are restless, and their vengeance knows no bounds." Ignoring his warning, I continued my investigation, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. I returned to the solder house one last time, this time armed with everything I had learned. As I recited the ancient incantations found in the old texts, the air grew thick with energy, the spirits of the victims swirling around me in a whirlwind of sorrow and anger. "Release us," pleaded, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding me. "Set us free from this eternal torment." The apparitions paused, their hollow eyes meeting mine with a mix of hope and despair. The axe-wielding spirit stepped forward, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Forgiveness," it whispered, "is the key." As I spoke the final words of the ritual, a brilliant light enveloped the room, the oppressive darkness lifting as the spirits began to fade, their anguished cries turning into peaceful sighs. The temperature rose, the warmth replacing the cold that had once gripped me. The whispers ceased, and a profound silence settled over the ruins of the solder house. Exhausted but relieved, I left Villisca with a newfound sense of closure. The mystery of the Villisca axe murders had been unraveled, but the experience had left me forever changed. I realized that some stories transcend the boundaries of life and death, their truths hidden in the shadows and whispers of the past. Years have passed since that summer of 1912, but the legacy of the Villisca axe murders lives on, a testament to the enduring power of love, loss, and the supernatural. The solder house, though reduced to ashes, remains a symbol of the unresolved mysteries that haunt us, a reminder that some spirits never truly find peace until their stories are heard and their wrongs acknowledged. And so, I warn others, respect the stories of the past, honor the memories of those who have been lost, and understand that some mysteries are intertwined with forces beyond our comprehension. For in the heart of Iowa, amidst the silent echoes of Villisca, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us toward redemption and understanding. Story number 6. The Shadows of Solder House, West Virginia. 1945. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that fateful Christmas Eve in 1945 haunting me like the lingering smoke that once filled the halls of the solder house. My name is Benjamin Solder, the youngest son of the Solder family, and the events that unfolded that night remain etched in my soul, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Our family had always been close-knit, residing in the charming solder house nestled in the quiet town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. The house was a beacon of warmth and love, especially during the holiday season. On December 24th, 1945, we were preparing for Christmas morning, decorating the tree and enjoying the festive spirit that enveloped our home. Little did we know, the night would turn into a nightmare that would forever change our lives. Around midnight, as the clock struck 12, A fierce storm rolled in, bringing with it heavy snowfall and howling winds. The power flickered before plunging us into darkness. The only light coming from the flickering fireplace and the soft glow of candlelight. We settled in for the night, the storm outside masking any unusual sounds that might have otherwise been heard. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the house, followed by the unmistakable crack of burning wood. Panic set in as we realized our home was engulfed in flames. My father, George Sauter, quickly ushered us into the attic, a temporary refuge he had prepared for emergencies. The heat was unbearable, the smoke thick and suffocating, but my father assured us that we would be safe. As we huddled together in the cramped attic, the fire raged below, consuming everything in its path. My mother, Agnes, held our younger siblings close, her face pale but resolute. My older brothers and sisters, Victor, Jenny, and Louis, tried to maintain calm, though fear was evident in their eyes. My father stayed by the door, keeping a vigilant watch for any sign of escape. Hours passed in the suffocating darkness, the sound of the storm outside blending with the crackling flames below. Just as dawn began to break, the storm finally subsided, and a piercing silence filled the house. Exhausted and disoriented, we made our way out of the attic, only to discover the horrifying truth. The fire had consumed the entire house, leaving nothing but ashes and charred remnants. But something was wrong. Despite the intensity of the blaze, there were no remains of my brothers and sister. My father insisted that Victor, Jenny, and Louis had been in the attic with us, but their absence was inexplicable. The only traces left behind were their belongings, untouched by the flames, as if they had vanished into thin air. Confusion and despair consumed us as we realized that 5 of our children were missing. We searched the wreckage, but there was no sign of them, no bodies, no tracks, nothing to indicate what had happened. My father refused to accept that they were gone, convinced that something or someone had taken them before the fire. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences plagued our family. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without warning, and eerie whispers echoed through the empty halls of the charred remains of our home. My father became obsessed with finding answers, delving into local legends and speaking with anyone who might have information about the mysterious disappearances. One night, as my father was poring over old newspaper clippings in the attic, he stumbled upon a story about a similar incident that had occurred years earlier in a nearby town. A family had vanished without a trace during a storm, leaving behind a house consumed by flames but no evidence of what had transpired. The only common thread was the eerie stillness that followed the disaster, a haunting silence that seemed to envelop the area. Determined to uncover the truth, my father began experiencing vivid nightmares, visions of our children standing at the edge of the attic, their eyes hollow and pleading. He spoke of shadows moving in the corners of his vision and the feeling of an unseen presence watching us. Our once peaceful home had become a place of torment, the spirits of our lost children unable to find peace. Desperate for answers, we sought the help of a local medium named Eliza Hartman, known for her ability to communicate with the dead. She arrived at our home one cold winter evening, her presence both comforting and unsettling. As she conducted her séance in the remnants of our attic, the air grew thick with tension, and the temperature dropped sharply. Eliza began to channel the spirits, her voice soft and ethereal. "Your children are not gone," she intoned, her eyes distant. "They are trapped between worlds, caught in the flames that consumed your home. They seek your help to break free from the darkness that binds them." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes as she clutched Eliza's hands, the pain of loss overwhelming her. "How can we help them?" she asked, her voice trembling. Eliza explained that to release the spirits, we needed to confront the source of the malevolent force that had taken our children. She guided us to perform a ritual of remembrance and acknowledgement, honoring our children's lives and the love we shared as a family. We gathered around the remnants of our home, lighting candles and speaking our children's names. pouring our hearts out in a plea for their return. As we chanted, the attic seemed to come alive with an otherworldly presence. The air shimmered, and the whispers grew louder, the spirits of our children manifesting before us. Their forms were translucent, their eyes filled with sorrow and longing. My father stepped forward, his voice strong despite the fear that gripped him. "We will not let you stay here in the shadows. You belong with us." A surge of energy pulsed through the attic, the malevolent force that had held our children captive beginning to dissipate. The spirits of our children reached out to us, their touch gentle and filled with gratitude. One by one, they faded, their presence replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped our home. The night sky began to clear, the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. The oppressive weight that had held us captive was lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and closure. Our family stood together, the bond we shared strengthened by the ordeal we had endured. Years have passed since that Christmas Eve, but the memory of that night remains vivid in my mind. The solder house, though no longer standing, continues to be a place of mystery and legend in our town. People speak of the eerie silence that lingers where our home once stood and the whispers of lost souls seeking peace. Our story serves as a reminder that some mysteries may never be fully understood, but the love and determination of a family can transcend even the darkest of forces. I often find myself reflecting on the thin veil that separates our world from the next, and the enduring power of love to conquer even the most malevolent of spirits. The shadows of the solder children still whisper in the winds of West Virginia, a haunting echo of a family's resilience and the eternal quest for peace amidst tragedy. Story number 7. Whispers of the Bell Witch, Tennessee. Early 1800s, I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of those harrowing years at the Bell Farm in Tennessee etched into my mind like the relentless shadows that once danced across our walls. My name is Samuel Bell, the youngest son of the Bell family, and the events that unfolded during those dark times remain a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was the early 1800s, a time when our family farm stood proudly on the banks of the Duck River, a sprawling estate surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. My father, John Bell, was a respected farmer, known for his hard work and unwavering faith. My mother, Mary, was the heart of our household, her gentle demeanor a stark contrast to the ruggedness of our land. My siblings and I thrived under their guidance, our lives simple yet fulfilling. However, our peaceful existence was shattered one fateful spring when strange occurrences began to plague our farm. It started innocently enough, whispers carried by the wind, shadows moving at the edge of our vision, and unexplained noises that echoed through the night. At first, we dismissed them as tricks of the mind or the sounds of wildlife, but the disturbances grew more frequent and sinister with each passing day. My father, a man of deep faith, attributed the strange happenings to a curse or the work of dark spirits. He prayed fervently, seeking divine intervention to protect our family from whatever evil had befallen us. But despite his prayers, the torment only intensified, as if the very land around us had turned against us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the farm, the disturbances took a terrifying turn. My father was working in the barn when he suddenly collapsed, clutching his chest in agony. Mary rushed to his side, her face pale with fear, but there was nothing she could do to save him. John Bell died that night, the cause of death listed as a heart attack. But we all knew there was something far more sinister at play. In the weeks that followed, the hauntings escalated. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without warning, and the air grew thick with an oppressive presence that seemed to seep into every corner of our home. My siblings and I grew increasingly fearful, our once secure farm now a nightmare we couldn't escape. One particularly cold night, the torment reached its peak. The entire family was gathered in the living room, huddled together for warmth as the wind howled outside. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering hearth. A cold, Malevolent presence filled the room, and an invisible force began to thrash against the windows and doors, as if trying to break free. "Who's there?" my mother cried out, her voice trembling with fear. A deep, guttural voice responded, echoing through the room. "I am the Bell Witch. You cannot escape me." Panic ensued as the room seemed to warp and distort, shadows morphing into grotesque shapes that taunted us with every movement. My father's spirit, though gone, peered before us, his eyes hollow and filled with despair. "It's not over," he whispered, his voice a mere breath on the cold night air. Desperation drove us to seek help from the local preacher, Reverend Jenkins, who had a reputation for dealing with such afflictions. He arrived at our farm with his Bible and a stern resolve, determined to banish the evil that had tormented us for so long. But no matter his prayers or rituals, the Bell Witch remained, her presence growing ever stronger, her malevolence seeping into our very souls. One night, as the witch's torment reached its zenith, I found myself alone in the barn, the rest of the family having retreated to the safety of the house. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the creaking of the old wooden beams as the wind continued its relentless assault. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and a spectral figure materialized before me, an apparition of a woman, her eyes burning with an unholy fire. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. The ghostly figure glared at me, her presence oppressive and filled with sorrow. "I seek revenge for the wrongs done to me," she hissed, her voice like the grinding of ancient stones. "You disturbed my peace, and now you must suffer." Fear and anger battled within me as I struggled to comprehend the extent of her vengeance. "What do you want?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The apparition pointed towards the dense forest that bordered our property. "Find the truth, uncover what happened to me, and perhaps there will be peace." Driven by a mix of desperation and hope, I ventured into the darkened woods the next day, determined to uncover the secrets that had bound the Bell Witch to our land. The forest was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of snow under my boots and the distant call of unseen creatures. Hours passed as I searched, my mind racing with questions about the witch's past and the origins of her wrath. Finally, I stumbled upon an old, forgotten cabin deep within the forest, its wooden structure weathered by time and neglect. Inside, I found remnants of a life long gone, tattered clothing, old journals, and photographs that told the tragic story of a woman who had been wronged and left to perish in the unforgiving wilderness. As I pieced together her story, the truth became clear. The Bell Witch was not a malevolent spirit born of pure evil, but a victim of circumstance, betrayed and abandoned by those she loved. Her death had been the result of a cruel accident, exacerbated by the harshness of the land and the indifference of those around her. Her spirit, unable to find peace, had turned to vengeance, haunting the Bell family for decades. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the farm, my heart heavy with the weight of the witch's suffering. I shared her story with Reverend Jenkins, who approached the problem with renewed determination. Together, we conducted a final, heartfelt ceremony, acknowledging the wrongs done to the Bell Witch and seeking forgiveness for the injustices she had endured. As we prayed, the air grew still, the oppressive presence lifting as the witch's spirit found the closure it so desperately needed. The shadows receded, the darkness giving way to a peaceful silence that enveloped our home. For the first time in years, our family felt a sense of calm, the horrors of the past finally laid to rest. But the legacy of the Bell Witch remains, a chilling reminder of the consequences of injustice and the enduring power of the human spirit. Our farm, once a place of peace and prosperity, now stands as a testament to the thin line between the natural and the supernatural, where the echoes of the past linger in every shadow and every whisper of the wind. Years have passed since those dark days, but the memory of the Bell Witch continues to haunt me, a spectral presence that serves as a reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring quest for redemption. The Bell Farm remains, its grounds still whispering with the stories of those who came before. A place where the veil between the living and the dead is as thin as the winter ice that once claimed our father's life. And so, I warn others, respect the past. Honor the memories of those who have been wronged. And understand that some spirits linger, seeking peace long after their time has passed. For in the heart of Tennessee, amidst the rolling hills and silent forests, lies a darkness that can consume even the bravest of souls, but also a light that can guide us towards forgiveness and eternal peace.